Hello, everyone. Um, I hope you're doing good this afternoon. My name is Victor Olo. I'm the communications manager for A-Staff. That is the Africa Clean Energy Technical Assistance Facility. And I'm going to be looking through the technical side of this workshop. That is making sure that everyone is connected and any issues that arise are handled before we proceed. Just a quick announcement for all of you who are already on the call. Kindly make sure that your microphones are turned off, and you can also switch off your video. For our speakers and the people who are going to be carrying out the two sessions, we will allow them to actually have their video on as they present to us. So for all of us, kindly just have your microphone off, and you can also turn off your video as we prepare to start in the next few minutes. Hello, everyone. Uh, this is Victor. My name is Victor Olo. I'm the communications manager for the Africa Clean Energy Technical Assistance Facility. We are just about to begin our workshop for today. So we kindly ask all of us to make sure our microphones are on mute so that we can have an easier way of communicating between all of us. In a minute, I'll be giving you some guidance on how we will run today's workshop. But before that, we're just looking to make sure that everyone is in, or at least most of us who are supposed to be joining us for today's workshop. So we give it about 3 minutes, or at least 3 to 5 minutes. Let's say we start at exactly 2:35, so that's in 4 minutes time. We will begin by running down, as I said, the guidance for the workshop, list of the speakers, the 2 breakout sessions that we have, and then we will head on to the plenary for today before then proceeding on to the 2 breakout sessions that we have. We look forward to having a good conversation today. Once again, just make sure that your microphones are off and your video is off as well. For our speakers, the ones who are going to be talking to us today, we will give them guidance on how to operate, specifically with regards to video and their audio as well. Hello again, everybody. So we are kicking off this afternoon's workshop. Thank you, everyone who has been able to join us at this point. For those who are still joining, they will find us as we go ahead with the workshop today. I will start with a quick rundown of some guidance to today's workshop. As I already mentioned, for those who joined earlier on, make sure you have your microphone on mute. This is just to make sure that we have easier communication between those who are presenting and those who are actually listening into the presentations. Make sure you turn off your video to avoid any distractions. Our speakers, we will kindly ask you to keep your video on, just so that our participants can be able to put a face to the person that is presenting to them. All your questions for the participants, kindly direct them to the speakers through the chat function. You will find the chat function just beneath the presentation. There's a control bar there, or a settings bar. For those who are using their phones, for those who are using their computers, it's pretty easy. You'll also just see it down there. Click on the chat function and write your questions. Write the person you're directing your questions to. There are 2 breakout sessions in today's session. You are welcome to attend any. The sessions will come right after the plenary and the opening session, with the introduction being done by our deputy team leader, Joyce Demuchi. Should you need any help with the information that is being conveyed, or with the platform or anything else in terms of the resources you'll receive today, just make sure to send us a message through the chat section, and I'll be able to attend to it, or Esther, my colleague, as well, will be on hand to be able to actually help. So our speakers for today are as listed. I will not go through them. I'll leave this up for those who are intending to go over this and understand who we have on the panel today. I'll come back to this for those who want to actually have a look at it. So the 2 breakout sessions, the first one is on how to attract investment for solar energy in agriculture. That will be facilitated by Colin Gumbo, who is our country manager for Tanzania and Rwanda. The second session will be about solving the forex challenge in Ethiopia, which will be facilitated by Eden Fenter, who is our country manager for Ethiopia. So we will start with a quick introduction to the program that will be offered by Joyce Demuchi, who is our deputy team lead at A-Staff. Joyce, I will hand over to you so that you can actually give us the introduction. Thank you, everyone. Joyce, you're on mute.
Sorry. Welcome, everyone, and good day to you all. I don't know where you're dialing in from, but as Victor said, my name is Joyce Demuchi. I'm the deputy team lead, and I'll take literally 5 minutes just to give you a really high-level overview. Many of you are aware of ACE, the Africa Clean Energy Technical Assistance Facility, and what our mandate is. But for those of you that are new, I'll just kind of go through that very, very quickly. And then hand it back over to Victor. So thanks, Victor. So ACE, the TAF program, or ACE TAF, is part of a broader program funded by FCDO. There are 4 components to the ACE program. The Technical Assistance Facility is one of those components. There are 3 others, including Sorry, it's everyone can thanks. So the other 3 are a challenge fund that's managed by the Africa Enterprise Challenge Fund. It's a React Household Solar Program. The Third one is quality assurance standards and laboratories. And the fourth component of ACE is SMAP, which FCDO contributes to in supporting mini grids in the off-grid sector. ACE-TAF is in 14 countries across Sub-Saharan Africa. It is focused, the primary focus is to catalyze a market-based approach for private sector to deliver standalone solar solutions and technologies to vulnerable communities. Our focus is on high-quality standalone solutions. It's designed to follow up on energy compacts in those 14 countries or energy initiatives that are taking place in those 14 countries. And it's mostly focused on complementing governments and private sector and donor initiatives and facilitating those conversations in the off-grid sector to overcome barriers that are limiting energy access in the 14 countries. The main approach to ACE-TAF is through catalyzing supporting improvements to the enabling environment, so assisting governments to put in place appropriate policies and regulations. Also kind of communicating across all of the stakeholders and specific information and increasing market intelligence for the sector and ensuring that information is usable. And then the third key approach and third key pillar, as we call it, is coordination. And we found that our presence on the ground, we have 10 country managers representing all 14 countries on the ground. And we recognize that, and what we found over the past 2 years of implementation is that the coordination efforts and the facilitation are adding quite a bit of value, not only to the governments in which they can hold stakeholders accountable, but also we're finding that donors are being more efficient in their implementation strategies to ensure that we're reaching universal energy access and helping them reach universal energy access. And I'll finally just state that we've identified 4 focus areas for TAF, given that there are a lot of stakeholders and a lot of the implementers. There's various implementers in each of the countries, but our focus areas are on 4. Policy and regulations, supporting the governments to develop and implement appropriate policies and regs to ensure, especially looking at not just national policies, but localizing those policies, different countries. Also finding that we're looking at another focus area on the energy nexus and how energy actually facilitates and supports not only economic development, but also social development in country. The third focus area is on access to finance and supporting our immediate focus right now is on consumer financing, but recognizing that supply side and understanding what other limitations there are to access to finance for vulnerable groups. And the fourth is on quality assurance and building capacities and tools to ensure that all of the countries adopt quality standards and we reduce the amount of poor quality products reaching the market. So I'll leave it at that. I think that was a quick overview and hand it back over to Victor. Thanks, Victor.
Thanks, Joyce. Thanks for the quick overview. I'll quickly take you to Karen Sosis, who is going to give us a quick snapshot, a keynote presentation on the status of the sector in East Africa, and then we'll proceed to the plenary. Karen?
Hi, thank you, Victor. Thank you, Joyce. Good afternoon to everyone. What I am going to do is give you a bit of an overview of what's happening. I'm a Nairobi-based consultant, working with the ACE-TAF team right now to oversee a series of 14 country market updates. These are to give a snapshot of what's been happening in the market in the last eventful 18 months or so. Right now, I've drawn from the work that the consultants in each of these countries has done, and I will give you a bit of a quick overview, which is not comprehensive. Thank you. I will put on the screen. I will just say right now that across the region, a couple of things that are specific to the EAC member countries, which is a shift in the definitions for import duty and their exemptions in the EAC region. That would be Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Uganda, to remove solar lanterns from exemption, which means they incur a 25% import duty in addition to whatever national level tariffs are applied. There has also been some progress with the Regional Industry Association, and not to overemphasize, but it's been a bit of a crazy time with locusts and floods and elections, and of course with COVID, as with the rest of the world. So thank you to the consultants, thank you to all, and I will just proceed quickly through each of the 6 countries to give you a bit of a snapshot. Here we go. We're starting in alphabetical order with Ethiopia. I'll discuss it all on supply side, demand side, and then the enabling environment. In Ethiopia, companies in this sector are not allowed to sell or distribute solar. They may manufacture or assemble. Obviously, this makes it quite a different scenario to all of the other countries. There were some interregional transport restrictions. So solar was not considered essential during the COVID lockdowns. And we see sales in the first half of 2020, the GOGLA reported sales, which is the most recent that we have, at 235,000, which was a major decline from what seems to have been an unusual spike, or maybe can be recuperated from the end of 2019. Demand side, we're looking at 60 million people unelectrified, a heavily subsidized grid, a general sense that there's high willingness to pay for pico solar, but much less so for solar home systems, whether that's an awareness problem or a pricing problem to be determined. Between locusts and COVID, there's an estimate that there have been 2 million more people falling into poverty, hopefully only temporarily, and quite several million jobs lost, with women not unusually hit the hardest. The National Electrification Program 2.0 targets 9 million off-grid connections, and there's an estimate of the dollar value of what that might mean for the off-grid solar market, but that is currently well beyond what the market is delivering right now and what it can in terms of Forex constraints. We just on the policy side, we do note that the government is actively promoting off-grid solar. On financing, we note that Forex reserves, and I know this is a subject of one of the breakout sessions, Forex reserves are low because of COVID and the overall global trade situation, remittances and FDI. The World Bank has a facility of the Development Bank of Ethiopia that is largely depleted, that was offering Forex to the sector. But we do have MFIs lending, although not so much. So financing is a sticking point. Market support, there was a multi-stakeholder off-grid task force that was established in 2020 and multiple donors supporting the space, seeing it as it is a major untapped market. Kenya, often the center of attention in East Africa, although it's sharing the stage with some of its neighboring countries more and more. On the supply side, during COVID, solar companies were considered essential and largely continued operations. There was some COVID-related tax relief by the government, not sector specific, but overall that has now lapsed. The first half of 2020 saw sales that were the highest in the region, nearly 1 million units, or just under 1 million units, which is actually down from 2019. There is local manufacturing, Solink, and we can hear you. And also M-KOPA has begun manufacturing TVs in Kenya. And there is quite a bit of activity and headquartered companies that are working on solar pumping, solar irrigation, the cold chain, including via PAYGO mechanisms. On the demand side, Kenya has made massive strides in recent years in grid connections. 85% access is an IEA, International Energy Agency figure. The Kenyan government puts it at 75%, but nevertheless, it's very high. We have a smaller unelectrified population many of them are being targeted through a program from the World Bank that I'll talk about in just a minute. The National Electrification Strategy estimates 2.2 million households could be served by solar. So there is an active recognition of the role of this technology in meeting electrification and energy access objectives. And we just note right here that some of the research that's coming out of Kenya, not different to other places, I'm sure, is that there has been an increase in loan defaulting and blacklisting of borrowers, undoubtedly resulting from economic strain around COVID. Activity within the political framework in Kenya, VAT has been reintroduced in 2020 on solar. In addition to the EAC shift, is quite a blow for the sector. The 2019 Energy Act set up a new agency that combined the Rural Electrification Agency with the Renewable Energy Department, REREC. Quality standards based on IEC standards have been gazetted very recently, I think within the last week or so. And there are regulations, draft solar regulations, e-waste, and extended producer responsibility regulations that are at various stages, including almost gazetted. And 2022 looking to an election cycle. Financing, it's hard to, these are just highlights. Of course, NG buying Mobisol, EDF investing in B-Box Kenya, Greenlight Planet securing $90 million, and Sun Culture for their solar irrigation systems, an $11 million syndicated facility. There is more that I'm not even mentioning. And back to the COSAP program, the Kenya Off-Grid Solar Access Program, I believe is the acronym, is looking at providing incentives for the private sector to reach 14 of the underserved counties. It includes an RBF, a results-based financing component, as does a separate RBF from the Africa Enterprise Challenge Fund, AECF. There has been some COVID relief, and as you could expect, various donors, in addition to the ACE-TAF team, who are supporting the sector in different ways. Quickly on to Rwanda. Sales declined in the 2019 to 2020 period, basically due to COVID, of course, affordability issues and minimum standards uncertainty. I'll talk about those. I can talk about this now. In 2019, the Rwandan government instituted ministerial guidelines for minimum standards for standalone solar. These describe what solar products are eligible for sale in the country. This is part of their acknowledgement that certain tier of standalone solar service provision can count as electrification. And so they are making sure that these are what is available for sale in the country is large enough to provide the basic level of service, which, as far as I know, is unusual across all of these countries. COVID, you had some border closure and inter-regional travel restrictions, also economic difficulties, and the market dominated. There may be about 20 companies operating in this space, but dominated by these four. Demand side, the government is making rapid progress on connecting or getting people connected on off-grid solar. The target is 100% by 2024 in access. Currently, of the 56%, 15% is through off-grid connections. The target is that 48% of the population, or 1.7 million households, would be connected via off-grid solar or mini grids by 2024. So they have set really ambitious targets. Most of these households, in particular because of these minimum requirements, will need subsidy as the addressable market begins to saturate. The political framework, I've mentioned the minimum standards and also the National Electrification Plan or program, which demarcates off-grid areas where solar or mini grids will be the solutions. And also an industry leading or a geographically leading e-waste public-private partnership between the regulator and a private company. The financing into the market is predominantly through a World Bank Renewable Energy Fund $50 million set of windows. I think there are now 5 windows that unfortunately has been hard to access or not really dispersing. Recently, I think the one dispersing to companies was at 12% disbursement rate. They have made some changes, they've restructured, so that may pick up starting around now. And Ignite, one of the main companies, has secured local finance from I&M Bank. And in terms of market support in Rwanda, we have a tracking system that is managed by government and supported by donors that's going to track sales. We have RBF that is looking to encourage companies to reach the people who haven't been able to afford solar up to now, supported by a $20 million guarantee from CEDA. And there is some support in country for solar irrigation that has been successful. Somalia, again, a very different market. Somalia, and please excuse me for rushing through you could spend days talking about each of these markets. Somalia, this is not news, but as many of you know, power is entirely privately supplied, primarily through privately owned mini grids in the urban centers. There is an active solar market, but we don't really know how big it is or where it's going because sales data is not forthcoming. Somalia, like its neighbors, has suffered from some major challenges in the last 18 months, including through a loss in remittances from global economic woes, as well as real problems in the agriculture sector from the flooding and locusts. On the demand side, there's an estimate that 9% of the rural population has electricity access. These are sort of loose estimates. The federal government has provided, I understand it's in a very unusual action, maybe the first of its kind, direct cash support to some of the poorest families who are suffering from COVID-related impacts. And a study from IOM reported that the impact of COVID-related economic issues on women-owned businesses has been severe. It's not surprising, but nevertheless of concern, seeing as there are relatively little in the way of social safeguards. Politically, there are elections planned but yet to take place, and two pending documents to oversee the sector, the policy and the electricity bill. Nevertheless, so off-grid solar continues to work in generally a policy vacuum. Financing, I mentioned that remittances are down. Local supply chain finance is available, but not readily accessed because of very high sort of two-pronged requirements to take out a loan. Consumer financing is through PayGo and through individual suppliers providing credit to customers they know. Also through linkages, an experimental linkage through remittances whereby there's a deduction that goes towards paying for a solar system over time. And everybody's favorite story is that one company is pioneering a goat barter for their solar home system because there is an equivalence in value. Very high mobile money use and some money coming into the sector from a donor. The multi-partner SEEP program, Solar Energy Access Program, if I'm not incorrect, has conducted a market survey, and they are acting on that through a consumer awareness campaign that's launching now, as well as the off-grid solar grant facility, which is a $700,000 competitive fund. And as I mentioned before, very little in the way of market data. Tanzania, similar to the Sub-Saharan African averages, sales of the first half of 2020 were down almost 30% due to COVID and also some policy uncertainty. Tanzania had lighter restrictions than some other countries, including no restrictions on internal movement, lifted by July 2020. General stability on exchange rates, which is not always the case across its neighbors, and certainly other countries in the region. And a May 2020 survey of 26 off-grid solar companies indicated that all of them had furloughed staff and half saw their sales decline dramatically. And the global LEAP RBF program, this is a results-based financing for refrigeration units and solar water pumps, has been finding some success, although less than it might have had there not been a global crisis. We have 35 million people unelectrified, and widespread Tanzania is, as many of you well know, one of the largest markets in the region and indeed on the continent. And so there's widespread awareness of solar already. Politically, there was a re-election in 2020 of the incumbent party. And then of note is, I think something interesting across the off-grid solar or standalone solar space in general is a 2018 Microfinance Act that will regulate PayGo companies as lenders. There are 4 tiers of regulations that are covering microfinanciers. The ones for lower tier lending, which would cover PayGo companies, are not in place yet, but stay tuned. I think that's coming in 2021. Also of note is that the regulator has mandated that solar installers are certified, which many of them, as you could imagine, are not. And so there is some vocational training and certification that is underway to help existing installers get accredited. Financing, there is a concessional credit line, a donor-funded credit line, TREAP, that has been restructured recently. It's reduced in size and not yet used. Neither has the Sunref $11 million fund been dispersed to our knowledge. Mobisol and Off-Grid Electric have both secured some funding, and in the how easy is PayGo category, 53% of the population have active mobile money accounts. And then just under market support, the Tanzania Off-Grid Coordination Platform, which I believe had some support from the ACE-TAF program. TEREA, the Renewable Energy Association, is lobbying among its other activities to include solar water pumps as farm instruments, which would make them eligible for tax exemptions. I mentioned the vocational training. There was a major survey done in 2019 and 2020 that has been helpful in terms of general data, and some COVID relief funding. And now I'll take a breath and move on to our final country, last but not least, Uganda, which saw similar declines in sales to its neighbors. Some local companies venturing into the PayGo space in partnership with PayGo platform providers, but PayGo is mostly from the larger international companies. A trend towards larger component-based solutions. 2020 saw some scaling down by Mcopa, Barefoot Power, and Solantis, which was sold to Village Power, and an upcoming certification requirement. This seems to be a trend across the countries. On the demand side, 32 million unelectrified. The Bureau of Statistics, UBOS, has estimated that that the off-grid market might be 3 million households. SE for All had come up with an estimate of 5 million. Either way, despite a historic and currently vibrant market for standalone solar in Uganda, they have not reached all that they could. COVID impact, as we could imagine, and very high and growing mobile money usage. Politically in Uganda, we have a draft energy policy that's pending approval. The World Bank's Energy Access Scale-Up Program, sorry if I've gotten the acronym wrong, which is following on the heels of their ERT 1, 2, and 3 programs, which have been highly successful. And there seems to be a shift in the management of those programs from REA to the ministry. The Free Electricity Connections Policy, ECP, which was temporarily halted, has now resumed recently with new funding. This is grid connections, but nevertheless, it sort of lets you know the context that there's an aggressive push to get people connected in both off-grid and on-grid. Quality standards are under development, and we've just seen an election cycle in Uganda that seems not to have affected things in a major way, although there have been changes at the REA. Under financing, Phoenix, by far the largest solar provider in the country, has gotten $12 million. I won't try this acronym, but the Uganda Energy and Credit Capitalization Corporation, I believe it is, has three local financing windows that are struggling to disperse, but maybe there could be some help in that regard. And finally, the Bureau of Statistics report, which has some very good information in 2020 that I mentioned earlier, some NDEV and PSFU, the Private Sector Foundation support, and new RBF for results-based financing, as well as the UOMA, Uganda Off-Grid Market Accelerator, which produced a 2020 update that's very helpful and available online. Now, I don't know, that must have taken me double the time that I was allocated, but thank you for listening. If I've missed out on anything important in your countries, forgive me, there's a lot going on. And I will turn it back over to Victor and talk to you again as we wrap up after the breakout sessions. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Karen. For anyone who has any specific questions for Karen, remember we had advised that you send your question through the chat section. So type your questions in the chat section and Karen will be able to get access to them. Our team as well will be picking them and making sure that they're either responded to through this or later on through the Q&A session or through some responses that we send later on. I would like to invite Mary, who's going to be leading, facilitating the plenary session. Mary, are you online?
Yes, I am, Victor. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I have a few speakers who will be joining me today. So let me start by introducing myself, and then I'll allow them to introduce themselves. And then we'll go through the questions and have a really vibrant discussion. My name is Mary Githinji. I am the country manager for Kenya and Somalia at ACE, and I will be facilitating this session this afternoon. Allow me to invite Itotia. Itotia, are you online?
Yes, I am. Thanks, Mary. And if you don't mind, I've been having a patchy connection, so I think my video connection has not been stable for the last 3 days. So if you don't mind, I'll just kind of talk without my video. My name is Itotia. I work for IFC, more specifically under a program called Lighting Global, really working with the private sector and the governments to develop the markets for off-grid solutions. And most, I think, of you would be familiar with the Lighting Africa programs, which we had in Kenya, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Tanzania, that are really focusing on developing the markets for off-grid. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Itotia. Pauline, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. My name is Pauline Githugu, and I'm the team leader for the Africa Clean Energy Technical Assistance Facility Program, which is hosting this workshop today. Yeah, over to you, Mary.
Thank you, Pauline. I have a guest today, Abdisalam from Somalia. Please introduce yourself. Abdisalam, are you online still? Okay, maybe not. Joel, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Mary. Joel Essien is my name. Country manager, Midstaff Uganda. Colleagues with Mary and Pauline. Nice to be here.
All right, great, thank you. We're going to have a quick discussion following what Karen has just presented to us. And primarily today, we are looking at the larger East African region. And we are going beyond what you normally think of as EAC, because we want to cover both Ethiopia and Somalia, which is outside of that regional bloc. We want to look at, the maturity of the market, the taxation. We want to understand what can government actually do to grow this sector, and such discussions. So I hope you enjoy the discussions. Please, if you have questions, as guided by Victor, kindly type in the chat box and we will be keeping up. It looks like Abdisalam has a poor network and he's trying to reconnect. So when he does, I'll allow him to introduce himself. All right, great. I think we can just go right to the questions. And Itotia, I'll start off with you. The East African region looks like a mature market for standalone solar. And, as we saw from what Karen presented, every market is different, but pretty vibrant from the outlook of it. How different are the countries doing in terms of universal access to electricity, in your opinion?
Yeah, so thanks, Mary. And so quite a bit of a challenging question there, because when you talk about universal access, it embraces both grid and off-grid solutions. But what I think has been interesting is that, yeah, as you said, can we describe all markets as mature? Perhaps not. I think others are ahead of the curve, more ahead of the curve than others. And interesting, I was just looking at the data that Karen was providing, and I've been looking at a couple of numbers. I've been looking at grid access, and I've also been looking at off-grid access. And I think, interestingly, Kenya and Ethiopia, when you look at off-grid energy access in terms of solar penetrations, it's above 30%. Yeah, so those are markets that that in many ways you can start describing them as mature markets in regards to market penetration. But I think once you start looking at other elements in regards to do you really have a competitive market in terms of financing? Yeah. Manufacturers able to obtain competitive financing? Do you have a competitive environment from a policy perspective of where it is encouraging people to thrive? Do you have a competitive environment in regards to just the programs that you are seeing, or policy in regards to, let's say, like dividend repatriation? So when you start looking at the competitiveness of the market itself, then again, you start having a distinction of some markets being ahead of the others. But I think the common theme that I see running across all these markets is that governments have embraced solar as a key component of their electrification plans, as you've seen from Karin. And what's interesting here is that maybe 3-4 years ago, solar was kind of being described as icing on the cake. Yeah, so it was not looked at as a mainstream element towards energy access. It was looking at, yeah, once you get to 75%, what do you need to get you to 100? And so solar was kind of in the periphery and kind of being used as just icing on the cake, as opposed to a kind of a long-term solution towards energy access. But I think I appreciate that the governments have stepped back, and I think they are doing a kind of a bottoms-up approach, acknowledging that the grid will not connect all areas, and in those areas where it will not be connected, then solar will be the solution for providing energy access. So I must say that cuts across all the various countries that we have seen. I think the challenge that I see now is that COVID has really changed a lot of things, and I think both on-grid and off-grid. And I think the biggest challenge that I'm seeing now is that, of course, governments have a huge, and I would say very ambitious targets that they had before COVID in regards to electrification. But I think the utilities have actually come out perhaps worse than off-grid companies from this impact of COVID. So I think most of you in the countries where you are in, you'd have seen a lot of reports indicating the losses that some of these utilities are having. And I think by extension, we anticipate that they might be able to, again, maybe scale down on some of the numbers that they had. And so I think more than ever now, it means that that solar, I think, is going to be taking a kind of a more important function in terms of just the role that it plays in these markets. So just circling back to your question on maturity. So I think a lot of common things that we have seen. If you look at the development partners, they have really focused on solar. World Bank, the institution that I work with, I was just looking at what they're going to be investing in terms of the plans and the programs that they have laid out, close to $1.3 billion in terms of just off-grid electrification programs, and about 200 million of that directly going to solar. Yeah? So the 1.3 million also encompasses electrification, solar electrification of public institutions. So huge amount of funding that is coming towards solar. So I think a very kind of common approach in regards to how the countries in East Africa are approaching this, and the differences that I see in regards to the country by country is just the competitiveness of the markets themselves. Others, I think, have more mature distribution systems, have more mature financial systems that put them ahead of each other. I think the last thing that I would say in regards to, or maybe the second to last thing I would say, is that I think the issue of tariffs has kind of knocked back solar a couple of steps back. I can relate to why the governments did this. I think we all understand the challenges that the governments have been having in regards to just showing up revenue. But I think duty and VAT is going to be a huge challenge. Yeah, so it's at a time when people in the markets have shrinking disposable incomes, and suddenly the duty and VAT tariffs are going to exert considerable strain. So that's one. And maybe just to conclude, what I really like about the maturity that I've seen is in the business models. I think PayGo started off as a very, very small niche market 5 years ago. Right now it's mature. And I read maturity from the fact, from how much companies are raising. I think just in the last 1 year, some of the top PayGo companies have raised about $200 million through this business model. And that's coming from more mainstream financial institutions. And I think within IFC now, a couple of banks have also approached us, local banks, saying that we also want to provide financing to this sector. So I would say there's a maturity in the business model. I'm seeing increasing maturity in terms of banks starting to take an active interest in financing this operation versus what we saw. We are not yet there. I think there are some countries that maybe just have about 1-2% penetration of solar products, others about 37%, so still some way to go. Thanks, Mary.
Wow. Thank you, Itotia. I'm thinking we need to develop some sort of a competitiveness matrix or something, because it's important to keep track of where are you being competitive as a market and where are you not. Thank you so much. So Pauline, second question's for you. What is the impact of taxation on universal access to electricity, especially for underserved communities in the region? Karibu.
Thank you, Mary. I think that's quite a broad question that the industry, the sector has been grappling with for a couple of years now. Predominantly, there has been a big push by private sector players to continue with exemptions that have been given, and where there have been none, for the introduction of exemptions. So in terms of impact, what we've seen even as a program, and we'll soon be releasing a study that we've done on the same, what we've seen is that there's potential for impact, especially for the more vulnerable groups, because indeed taxation does, of course, to state the obvious, it does impact on the end price to the consumer. But I think there's a bigger question than that, because we've seen taxation, tax exemptions, or other fiscal incentives in various markets over the years, in various markets over the years. And in these markets, it's difficult to ascertain whether the end user has actually been reached with the price advantage of having fiscal incentives in place. So from an ideal situation, yes, there is impact. Taxation does have impact on the pricing of goods. Where there have been incentives, it is difficult to ascertain whether the advantage or the increase or the reduction by having exemptions has actually reached the end users, and primarily whether the vulnerable populations have actually had any impact or any advantage to them due to tax incentives being given by countries. So that's what I would say. I think there's still quite a bit of inward looking that we need to have, even as we have these conversations with various governments, whether to continue to have incentives in place or to introduce new incentives in place. There's still quite a long way for us to go as the sector to show accountability or to prove accountability for the incentives that have been issued so far.
Great, thank you, Pauline. I think this is a conversation, I think, across the region that needs to be had. and very careful thinking through what's the right incentive, at what point should the incentive be put in place, and is it benefiting the end user and primarily the most vulnerable populations. That's really, really important. I'm hoping Abdisalam is online now because I want to ask you a question.
Hello, Mary.
Hi. Great. So I'll ask you to introduce yourself. Abdisalam.
Yes, please. Sorry, I'm having bad network. I hope you can hear me. My name is Abdisalam Abdullahi. I am the project coordinator for the World Bank Finance Projects in Somalia.
Great, thank you for joining us. And I think we are all used to hearing what happens in Kenya, in Uganda, in Tanzania. So we're really happy to have you online, because I think it's important for us as a region to get to understand what's going on in Somalia and really be able to discuss more and learn from one another. So how would you say the market for standalone solar is growing in Somalia? And what interventions is the government putting in place to support the sector?
Thank you, Mary. Again, perhaps first I'll just briefly describe how the electricity supply industries in Somalia, so people can understand information about Somalia. So the sector, the electricity sector operation is owned, managed, and operated by electricity service providers. So the private sector they deliver this service through vertically integrated geographical monopolies. And the ad hoc nature of the private sector service, had led to highly fragmented of where the service is actually the currently the private sector actually they mainly focus on the populated cities, perhaps just to justify the investment returns, and they don't necessarily invest heavily into the rural areas, for example, and these have created at least an entire population that have been left out. The poor households and businesses, for example, households and businesses, for example, that are not necessarily close to the mini grid. It's the same for the domestics who normally move from one place to another have been also left out without connection. And the only viable solution for the Somali government to provide connection to these citizens is currently available is the off-grid solution. And if I just say a few things about the market, for example, potential of the market of the off-grid, there's a potential of customers of 7 million according to the World Bank market assessment that we have been also personally participating and conducting those assessments, and the possibility or the potential at least of selling 1.1 million solar products. So I think that's a huge potential in terms of the availability of the products and the customers in the Somali sector. In terms of what your question of what the government is doing, the government is doing a lot of
Abdisalam.
demands and interventions and providing incentives to the private sector.
We're really struggling to
Hello?
hear you. Hi, now I can hear you. You were saying?
I'm sorry, actually, I don't know where you are lost. I have a bad connection today. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, just want to take a few examples of your question of what the government is doing with regard to the off-grid sector. We are undertaking a number of initiatives. Number one is, I want to take two examples. The solar grant facility, supported by, funded by the World Bank through objective is to remove the market barriers and provide access to financing to the private sector, access to quality products, and also consumer awareness and some business development support to the private sector as well. So it's connecting the potential. It's at least, through, we are incentivizing the private sector so they would be able to procure good quality products and provide it to the customers with more favorable market conditions, for example, in terms of financing and providing some credits, for example. And the second thing is we are also engaged with a number of partners, including CEDA through, for example, this AECF projects, RAM project, which is reactor program, which is currently actually also mainly $8 million project, which is focused on the off-grid sector. And so the government is providing direct incentives to the private sector, and so to remove the barriers so that they can go and invest in these solar products and also provide service to the rural communities and those poor households that have been left out by the main suppliers. Sorry about the connection, but that's what I want to say.
Great, thank you so much. I think we've been patient and we've picked up a couple of items from what you've said. Thank you very much. I think we'll go on to Joel. Joel, how would the East Africa region benefit from a harmonized taxation framework for standalone solar? And would this accelerate access to electricity?
All right. Thanks, Mary, for your question. I think the harmonized tax framework in East Africa would do a number of things. First off, I think it would ease the movement of goods, so from the border into the various countries across the region. And that would save both on the time it would take and also the costs associated with that. I think the second thing that it would help would be on the seamless linkage between, because as we know, there's a very close linkage between application of quality standards and taxation at the various border points. So it would help on the seamless linkage between the two, resulting in the mid to longer term, it will result in an improved quality of standalone solar across the East African markets. Another thing which I think it would result into would be increased affordability of standalone solar products across the countries in the East African region, owing to harmonized or at least near uniform pricing. I think it would also lead to increased access to standalone solar products by vulnerable communities because as a result of increased access in the market, I think it would also have an impact on improved last mile distribution. All these are benefits that trickle down from harmonized taxation. And closely related to that, I think it would also lead to better tracking of the same, how the access is being done. And I think finally, because of a harmonized tax framework across the region, then the various actors in the market would be able to have a consistent approach of dealing with the challenges that they face. Because as we know, many of the challenges that are faced in the market are not really from the technical perspective, but really rotate around to a very large extent policy and taxation. So that's my response to the first part of the question. To the second part of the question of whether it would improve access to electricity, my very short response is yes. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you very much. So perhaps something we need to think about. How do we harmonize at the regional level so we can all benefit? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Itotia, I have a question for you. Is there a role for EAC to play in improving the enforcement of standards across the region and therefore reducing the level of non-quality verified products in the bloc?
Yeah, so thanks, Mary. So this is a big one, yeah. So low quality products and the impact that they have in the market, because the distortion that low quality products have is a big one, yeah. So on an average, if you're having two products that seemingly appear to be the same, and one is having a 50% premium, and the consumer really does not understand the factors that contributes towards that, then I think it's obvious as to what choice the consumers will make. So I think these products have had a really challenging kind of impact in the marketplace by distorting prices. Over and above that, I think that whole issue that I think Karin mentioned in terms of extended user responsibilities of low quality products, they are basically you use about 3 or 4 of these products in a year. So the impact also that they have from an environmental perspective is a big challenge. And I believe there's a role for harmonization here. And harmonization, I think most of the governments across East Africa have embraced quality standards. And I think the room that is here, the room that I see in terms of that integration is on enforcement, in whereby most of these bureaus of standards, I think, are today undertaking independent tests to verify whether a product has met standards or not. And what is perhaps not happening is sharing that information widely amongst the member countries, that we have tested this type of products and it did not meet the standards. And so if at all you have it out in the marketplace, then look out for it because it hasn't met the standards. Yeah. So because the standard is the same. Yeah. The standards that they have adopted is the same across most of the countries in the East African bloc. The standards that Lighting Global developed and for which now IC has embraced. So the standards are the same, but I think the information is not being shared widely. But the bigger challenge here is that having the comfort level that I can now entrust the standards or the testing that has been undertaken in country X, and so that I can now use it as a way in which I can now go and enforce the standards in my country. So I think that will be the biggest thing in terms of just ensuring that that the labs that are in these countries, that the personnel in these countries are all reading from the same script, because I think that confidence level is important. Because if at all there's a country that doesn't have much confidence level in maybe the expertise and the results that are coming from a particular country, then that provides its own challenges. So I think there's room here in terms of just ensuring that that the capacities of these labs are operating at the same level. The quality that is coming out of this lab is one in which instills a lot of confidence in everybody else. And I think now what the ACE program is doing in terms of just together with IFC in terms of setting up these labs that they can then go and do the market enforcement, I think is a step towards that. I think ultimately, if all the labs have the capacity to be able to undertake these tests locally, and all of them have the same capacity in terms of expertise, then I think the ability of some of these traders and distributors to be able to kind of run circles around these agencies, I think, will be limited. It's really hard for you to be able to curtail it in full, but I think these are tentative steps that can be done in terms of that objective. So huge room, and I think I see that will have a big play in terms of just addressing the distortions that we see in the marketplace, and also towards making these markets competitive. I think we've seen some manufacturers who are shying away from certain markets, and the thing they say is that I cannot compete in these markets. Yeah, the price is one that I cannot match. Consumers do not have the ability to discern the quality. and again, the shareware. So the markets are kind of deprived of a good quality products just because they're not competitive from a quality perspective.
Thank you, Itotia. So quality is a really key thing that we need to look at the regional level, not just in every individual country, but also at the regional level. Thank you so much. Pauline, I'm trying to run through the questions, and then I'm hoping we'll have a few minutes to look at the questions that have been posed in the chat box, although I know my colleagues are responding as we go. All right, Pauline, what would be the value of harmonized standards for the East Africa region, especially recognizing that not all countries, especially the ones that we are talking about today, are within the EAC bloc?
Yeah, thank you, Mary, for that question. I think it's been partially answered just previously now by Itotia. Because primarily the standards are the same. What we are adopting are the IEC standards, which are international standards. And therefore, so I mean, there is no harmonization of standards across whether it's East Africa or wherever, even the African continent as a whole, because we are relying on one set of standards. I think what I would say, what would be of greater value to the market is not just the adoption of the standards, but it's actual implementation and enforcement of those standards. And by implementing and enforcing those standards, then you would have a sort of a harmonized approach, because without enforcement of standards in these countries as they are being adopted, you will find that there is a leakage then for non-conforming products leaking into the countries that are not fully enforcing the standards. And I'd say so this would probably be the more important regional approach that that countries should have to look and ensure that they have they're enforcing, not only adopting, but also enforcing the standards to avoid those leakages through, as we know, most of our countries have got very porous borders. And so that would be what I think would be valuable.
Thank you, Pauline. I think for all policy and regulation across the region, implementation is always possibly the biggest challenge. And that really, yeah, that's big. Great, thank you. So Joel, would tax incentives have a role to play in helping people move up the energy ladder, especially standalone solar consumers moving from tier 1 to tier 2?
Yes, as a follow-up to the points that I mentioned in the previous question, the very logical progression would be yes. It would actually help to ensure that clients move from tier 1 to tier 2, and well, even before the harmonized taxation framework that we see happening, we already see elements of this starting to happen in some sections of the market. So the very short answer is that yes, it would help significantly. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. Thank you so far. And Itotia, the last question, and I think for me, the one that we all really need to pay attention to and see how do we do this together, is what are the two key things that governments need to do to achieve their universal access electricity targets. In Kenya, for example, it's 2022. That's very close. So what are the two key things that you'd recommend for governments to do?
Yeah, thanks, Mary. I think the challenge that I see is that I think COVID has put a significant challenge on the entire private sector. I think you have issues now where lower disposable incomes have kind of poses a big challenge in terms of affordability of products. So I think policy is still going to remain a big challenge. And I can see, I think there's Josephine Mapila who's kind of asking, the impact of some of these physical barriers. And so the high tariffs now, I think, are a big challenge. So I think the government needs to revisit some of the strategies that they had before COVID and after COVID, and see whether there's still lots that needs to be changed in regards that markets have changed, disposable incomes have changed, financing has contracted. And so some of those assumptions that had been made before, I think, needs to be revisited. And I think the key one that is within the government control, in my view, is policy. But I also acknowledge that it's a very tight balancing act for them, really trying to ensure that they show up revenues, which have kind of been hit hard by COVID, but at the same time provide the necessary incentives that they need to provide to the private sector and downstream to the consumers. So that's one. Then the second thing I think that they really should continue working on is making the respective countries competitive. I think luckily for countries within East Africa, that whole issue of mobile money, I think it's a very liberalized kind of market, unlike what we see in some countries in West Africa, where I think that has proved to be an impediment for paygo companies. But I think it's government really taking a look as to whether they have created platforms that encourage the private sector to be able to thrive. There are some countries where we hear that getting some of the work permits for people who are maybe qualified to be able to run some of these paygo systems that require highly technical staff, they are not able to get those, and so that proves to be a big challenge for them. So again,
Am I the only one who lost it, Otia?
Can you hear me now?
I think we lost it.
Okay. I think I heard you a few seconds ago. Itotia, are you still with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I think I was just saying a couple of years ago, I think all of us across Africa were looking at some of the affirmative action that the government was taking in terms of the policies that they had in supporting SMEs. And I think that's the kind of thing that we kind of need, because most of the companies are SMEs, and I think they're able to tap into some of the systems that has, but I think policy will be a big thing going forward for the government. So that's for me what would be the key thing that I would advocate for, in terms of them really looking at their policy and creating a conducive environment.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you all for allowing us to pick your brains, quote unquote, this afternoon. I think we can go through a few questions. So I don't know if Esther and Victor, are there questions that you think we need to tackle? We have 2 minutes for this session.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Sahale Tasfai from Ministry of Water, Irrigation and Energy. And I think there was a connection problem around here, but I cannot join you. So I can you can read the questions that is already prepared for me, or I can tell you about the solar product, or in general the renewable energy dissemination in Ethiopia. For the solar, we have made some improvements in giving much priority, especially to import solar products by allocating foreign currency for solar.
All right, I think you're in the next session already. So the next session, we have a breakout that focuses on Ethiopia. And I think that might be where the questions that they had for you will be for the next session.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening in, and we can't wait to hear what you're doing in Ethiopia. Thank you. Victor,
Okay,
is there any question that we need to tackle before we close from the chat? Or Esther? Okay.
Yes, I think there's a lot of questions, but time is also not on our side.
Okay.
Let me see if I can pick one. There's a question here, and I don't know who it is directed to. There's one asking, is there a way to manage the type of companies who make substandard products widely available, particularly in rural areas? I don't know who you will pose that to. So you can have that one, and then maybe one other one. Is there a possibility to make a list of quality products of SAS along with manufacturers to share in the region and to have nearly the same regional technical standards? I think a lot of the questions are based on quality standards, and I'm suspecting that a lot of them might go to some of the people from IFC, but yeah. So those two. The first one is on the type of companies who make substandard products, how to manage them. The second one is the possibility of making a list of quality products of SAS along with manufacturers to share in the region.
All right. Itati, are you able to take those two quickly?
Yeah, so Itotia is not able to take them. I think he's dropped from the call because of network. But maybe the general comment I can make is that the work that you see us talking about on standards is really to try and manage the quality of the products that come into the market. You have to start by providing a legal framework that provides what standards the country will accept of certain goods coming into that country. And these are the quality standards that we've been talking about, the IEC standards that have been adopted in various countries across Africa. Once you put that standard in place, then you put the regulations that prevent importers from bringing products that do not meet that standard. So this is through various ways. You know, there is a PVOC process, which means that importers have to have certification of the goods that they're bringing into the country even before it leaves the country of manufacture. So the standards that we are talking about here are very key and very critical if we are to determine the level of quality of products that come into each of the countries. So it really is a first step, and then all other steps follow. So even to the question as to whether, you know, there is a way of making sure that these companies do not bring poor quality products to the rural areas, the real answer to that is that it has to start with the framework that is set up by the government that then discourages people who do not meet that standard from bringing products that are not quality certified into the market.
Great. Thank you, Pauline. And thank you all for sharing your brains with us, and for the participants for listening in. We will go through the comments and try and give you some feedback as best as we can. Victor, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary, and thank you, everyone. So we will proceed to the breakout sessions. For those who are joining the session facilitated by Colin on how to attract investment for solar energy in agriculture experiences from with experiences from the field, I've pasted the two links on the chat section, and I'll paste them again. Click on the first one if you're joining the session on that. And if you're joining the session on Ethiopia, which is solving the Forex challenge in Ethiopia, click on the second link. Both meetings are live, so anyone who just clicks, you will find yourself in the next meeting room. And make sure that when you get there, the same rules apply. Make sure your microphone is on mute. and allow for those who are actually presenting to be able to communicate with us effectively. Once we are done with the session on the other side, just come back to this particular session. It is when you leave this meeting, it will pause this one. When you leave the other one, you can just come directly back into this one so that we can have the wrap-up session and conclude together. Thanks, everyone. See you on the other side when you join the breakout sessions.
Hello? Hello, Johanna, ይሰማል? Greetings. Sorry, we are not connected to the session. Maybe. Can you help?
Hello?
ብሬክ ብሎ ነው የወጡት፣ ግን ምንም የተመለሰ የለም። እንኳን እንደሆነ ብሬካቸው አለ ምን ፈልግ ማንካ ምን አይ ከአሁን በኋላ ትደውልልሃል ሰውዬው ወይስ
ጋሽ ሙሉጌታ አንስልክታ የፈጠነን ስልክ ሰጠኛ ነገር ደወለችልኝ እኮ ሰው የፕሮፌሰር ስራሽ ልጅ ነች እኮ የፕሮፌሰር ስራሽ ልጅ ነች። የመቤት ነግሬው እሺ ብሎኛል አለችኝ። ስለዚህ ስልኩን ስጠኝ። ፈጠነንም የጋሽ ሙሉጌታ ሲመጣ ትሰጠኛለህ።
Scenario to all the other countries. There were some interregional transfers.
አንድ ሁለት ሶስት
በቃ ስጠዋ አንተ ያለን ፎቶኮፒ አድርገህ የኮምፒውተሩንም አንድ ላይ ነው ፎቶኮፒ አታናግሪ ሴትዮዋ አናገረችው አይደለ ያውቃል አለች በዛ እንደምሳሌ
scenario to all the other countries.
በሱ ጋር እንኳን እኮ በጣም አዝመመሽ በሙሉ ቂጥሽ ውስጥ ቁጭ ባጎን ቂጥሽ
Yeah, the group I see in terms of integration is movement in where I
መጠን ሶፍቱን ደግሞ ከስር አድርገሽ አይደርቅም? ይደርቃል። ባልዲ ክዳን ላይ ያደረግሽው ከስር አድርገሽው ብትሸፍኚው ከምናምን ያለው ነገር ፍለግ አድርጎ በስራ ዝርግት አድርገሽ በሁለት እጅ የቆሻሻ
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Apologies for the delay. I guess the conversations on both sides were too good for people to leave. I have actually been dragging the team from Ethiopia to come back and join us. I don't know if we have Colin on the call already. If we do, Colin, we would like to hear, some brief feedback or some of the things that came up from your session. In about 3 to 5 minutes, just give us a brief of some of the things that are coming up on your session, from your session. And then after you, we will give a chance to Eden as well to present to us what has transpired in the other session. My apologies, the conversations are good, but time. So Colin, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Victor. So our discussion was around how to attract investment for solar energy in the agricultural sector. It was very, very good discussion. We got some insight from the field from Uganda, but also from Tanzania. So if I can summarize, there were about five takeaways from the session. One was all about the initial investment farmers. So look like farmers still have a problem to access credit from the banks to be able to, to purchase solar appliances, the solar irrigation pump, the refrigerators. It's still a challenge, but PAYGO, as it is doing in solar home system, is also emerging as a solution for financing, if you like, for productive use appliances which are used for agriculture. But again, we've also seen MFI, microfinance institutions, whose conditions, I would say, are not that restrictive as the formal banks, as the commercial banks. So that was the first takeaway. But the other issue was around food security. I mean, the solar appliances enables the farmer to improve the productivity of the yield from the farm, but also it helps them to generate income, which can enable them to purchase food and improve their nutrition. So that was another takeaway. The other takeaway was about awareness. So in East Africa, looks like there is very reasonable, good awareness on lantern and solar home system. but also productive use appliances for agriculture, because now they are emerging gradually. We are seeing more and more awareness, but more work has got to be done. And looks like of all the technology, solar pumps is, people are more cognizant now about this technology on solar pumps. But now again, more work needs to be done to other technologies as well to increase their awareness. And again, so there are various opportunities on the technologies to be used in agriculture, but looks like two areas are popular or are paramount: soil irrigation, one, but also post-harvest. How do you address post-harvest losses? So drying is also an area where there is an opportunity. So I think those were the key takeaways from the session. Back to you, Victor.
Thanks, Colin. Do we have Eden on the call? Eden?
Hi, Victor. I'm here. So our discussion was about improving access to finance for off-grid solar solutions, and we had a number of feedbacks and discussions. But what we learned is we need to continue this discussion, and this is a major challenge, and the ministry has to drive this discussion in terms of on how to unlock additional financing and resolve some of the forex issues. And when we talk about addressing the forex issue, we need to also look at what are the short-term and mid-term and long-term solutions, and where can development partners play a key role. And what we noticed in the case of Ethiopia, where in the short term, development partners are providing credit facilities, including World Bank and FDB, to private companies to import solar products. And programs like USAID are also looking at remittance projects, to improve, to have access to forex. The other projects was also the ACF project, which is now providing some funding to 10 companies, which is very massive in the case of Ethiopia. So we learned about these different donor programs and facilities in terms of addressing this forex challenge. But one interesting thing we also heard was from the Shell Foundation program about improving local manufacturing, because that will also reduce our reliance on importation. And they also talked about organizing B2B discussions, supply chain financing and different instruments to encourage local manufacturing, where we also see a huge potential in the case of Ethiopia, because we have 100 million population. So there is a massive opportunity for local manufacturing. And finally, what we also saw was, the market is closed for foreign companies, and to meet the energy, the universal access target, it's very difficult to reach that without gradually opening up the market to foreign investors and even foreign debts and equity. So in conclusion, what we've discussed is there are a lot of activities to be done, and for the ministry to drive this initiative. And the ministry has recently also established a working group on finance and payment. So we'll drive that discussion through that. So it was a very interesting discussion. I also forgot to thank our panelists, because we had very interesting points to discuss. So I would like to thank my panelists and our participants for their valuable feedback. Thank you.
Thanks, Eden. Esther, are you on the call?
To Victor?
Yes, so we are coming to the end, and I think you had some 2 questions that you wanted to pose to the participants, even as we wrap up, and then you can help us with the closing. if there's anybody else that needs to be invited. My apologies to everyone. The conversations are very good, but the time has unfortunately run out on us. So we will try and make sure that all the questions are captured and shared with the people that need to respond to them. And we'll also share all the resources, including the video recordings of all of both sessions and the main plenary. Esther?
Yeah, thank you, Victor. We'll just request like Karen to wrap it up with what has been really interesting and the two questions there, and just to let the others know about the upcoming workshop that will be happening next week. Karen?
Sure. Hi. Hi, everyone. Can you see me? Esther and Victor, I don't know which two questions you're referring to. Oh, maybe they're in the chat?
Yes, they're there in the chat.
Okay, let me just open this. Hi, everyone. Greetings again as we close this workshop. Questions for you are any key takeaways that you have? What did you think was the most interesting or the newest, most important piece? And is there anything else that you'd like to receive information on from us so that you can begin taking action on some of the ideas that we talked about today? Those are questions for you, and I guess you can type your answers into the chat. While you're answering, I can do a little bit of admin. I can let you know that as Victor and Esther said, all of these sessions will be made available to you, as well as my presentation from earlier summarizing the 6 countries. We are publishing market updates on each of these countries in the coming weeks. You can look for those on the ACE website, and they'll be publicized when and as they come out. In the meantime, there will be one-page documents that summarize the current, basically similar to my presentation, but they look much nicer. Available, as I understand it, from tomorrow on the website. So those are sort of summary documents. We also may be able to make, Victor and Esther can confirm this, the information that was gotten from the West Africa workshop, which happened a few weeks ago, if anyone thinks that that would be interesting. And last but not least, on the logistics, we have the final of the 3 workshops for Southern Africa coming next week, Thursday the 18th at the same time. And I believe that Esther or Victor will be sharing the link with which you can join and register for that. I'm just looking at the questions here. When will there be a physical event? Well, I'm going to leave those for the moment unless Joyce or Pauline want to jump in. I do want to say thank you to all of you for joining us. And thank you to our speakers and our participants. Thank you to the ACE-TAF team who worked hard to put this together and who are working hard every day to help get the information out and make this this sector grow. And that is all from me. I will close on that note. Many thanks.
Many thanks, Karen. Maybe I can take the question on when will there be a physical event. I think that we cannot tell at this point, but definitely, there is a lot of good insight and information that we'll continue to share on platforms that allow us to remain safe, even with the COVID pandemic. And when things do open up, we'll certainly look into how we can have events that bring us together for that more in-depth and one-on-one conversation. Thank you. Over to Victor.
Thanks, Pauline, and thanks everyone. I think these workshops are very interesting, and so 2.5, 3 hours just goes by without you knowing how fast it has gone by. So in that regard, we would just want to say thank you and wish you all a great rest of your day. We are looking forward to hosting you for next week's workshop, which will be the Southern Africa workshop. It's on Thursday, the 18th. For those of you who have been a part of this workshop, I will send you a direct link to the workshop so that you can join if you're interested in finding out about the opportunities in Southern Africa. If there's any other requests that you have based on what you have heard today, or any resources that we have on our website or any of the other platforms that we have, feel free to reach out to Esther or myself or any of our team members, and we'll be able to provide that opportunity, those resources for you. For now, I think we say thank you and have a great rest of your day. For those who might want to get in touch with us as the program, we have our website, which is on screen right now, www.ace-taf.org. On the same website, if you go to the Knowledge Hub, you'll find all the resources that we've developed in the past 1.5 to 2 years. So there's a lot of great resources there that are wide-ranging. Please visit our website and be able to get yourself some of that information. We share a lot of our information as well on social media, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and the phone number down there is for our office line. So if you need to get in touch with the office, then just call that phone number and you'll be able to get someone to assist you. As I said, I insist, visit the website, www.ace-taf.org, and visit the Knowledge Hub. There's a lot of great resources there for you to download, use, share with the people that you think it might be relevant to, and also make sure you provide us with the feedback on a lot of those documents. As part of this workshop, we'll share the resources that were shared today. We'll share links to the videos that have been recorded for all the sessions. And we are also going to be following up with a lot of our participants, including you, on your feedback with regards to how this was organized and the content that was therein in a short survey that will be coming to you next week. Thanks again, everyone, and have yourself a great evening. For those who are in areas where it's evening, for those who are in areas where it's morning, have a great rest of your day and a great weekend ahead.
Bye.